Hello, teachers from around the world, and welcome to Legendary Educator, the podcast that helps you improve your performance in the classroom and have more engaged and motivated students. My name is Ramis Takawi. I'm a teacher and instructional coach, and I created this podcast because I'm passionate about education and about students achieving their highest potential. Today, we'll be discussing PLCs, or Professional Learning Communities. We'll be talking about why they're so valuable to your school's culture and how to set them up. Before we begin, please take a moment to subscribe to the podcast so you won't miss any future episodes as they drop. Let's get to know our guest today, Dr. Jennifer Freeland.
Hi, everybody. I'm Jennifer Freeland. My students call me Dr. Freeland, and my colleagues call me JF. I am currently retired, happily so, here in my Delray Beach, Florida office. My background is from exceptional child education, and I went from there to becoming a curriculum specialist for computers when they were coming around. I moved then into an administrative position, both assistant principal and principal at the elementary level in United States and Florida. And after 35 years there, I moved to Florida Atlantic University and worked significantly with master's students wishing to become principals in a federally funded partnership program with both Florida Atlantic University and Broward County Schools. And I did that for about another 10 years. And so now I am happily retired. My favorite teacher in my whole life was in fourth grade, and it was Mrs. Dyer. And unfortunately, right now, I look a lot like Mrs. Dyer did then, gray hair, and teaching math. I despised math. I never felt I was any good at math. I did rectify that later. But Mrs. Dyer was the teacher who took where we were and gave our problems to be something that we were interested in and we had fun with. And we used all the sports games that we played and all manner of other concrete, real-world issues that kept us interested and kept me working. And I have always held her in the highest esteem.
Dr. Freeland, thank you so much for joining me today.
My absolute pleasure. You're one of my favorite people.
Oh, get out. I actually had the privilege of attending a professional development led by you and some of your colleagues from Florida Atlantic University. And I can't begin to describe the benefits that I gained as a teacher. So having you on the podcast is it's a treat for me and for the listeners. So again, thank you so much for your time today. Let me start by asking you about your professional life. Why did you become not just a teacher, but a professor of education? What was your inspiration or motivation?
When I was 5 years old, I'm the youngest of 5 children. And when I was 5 years old, I once ran away from home. And I ran away to school.
No.
And
that's curious.
I haven't left since. It has been in my core value to continually learn. And I haven't stopped that even in retirement. I wanted to keep learning, and I wanted to work with people who wanted to keep learning even when they didn't know they wanted to keep learning. We can compel attendance, but learners are volunteers. You can say, okay, everybody, you have to go to this room at this time and you will sit there, but that doesn't mean people are open to the learning. So part of what I have devoted my life to is to encourage learning in a variety of different settings. So as I was coming up through the ranks, I could see one of my jobs as I was coming up was a curriculum director, and I went to different schools. And I could see walking through those schools, and it was a sight and it was a visual feeling walking into a school. What is the culture here? What is the climate here? who are the leaders here, and how is this a good environment for learning for everyone in the building? And from that, I went on to other learning for my own edification, for master's degree and my doctorate degree. And I felt that I could give back by providing that type of an environment and working with the people in that environment, students and teachers, to really create that continuous learning climate for everybody in the building. So that's my motivation.
One of the things that you stressed on during the professional development sessions that I mentioned earlier was something called a PLC, a professional learning community. Can you explain what this is, and why do you find it so important for teachers?
The concept of a professional learning community is certainly not new. Different writers and philosophers, Ted Sizer, for example, began with something called critical friends groups, and different historical ways of looking at what is a common group of people who are choosing to focus on a specific problem. And by looking at not necessarily someone coming forward with an answer right away, but working through what those issues are in a very collegial environment. Unfortunately, the term PLC has been co-opted, and it has. If you look now, people say, "Well, I'm going to this workshop on new reading strategies, and that's my PLC." Well, going to a workshop and learning new strategies is terrifically important. People need to improve efficacy. Teachers need to improve their efficacy. I can do this when looking with all of the different issues that kids bring to us just by walking through the door in a school. But that's not a learning community. And the climate and the culture that needs to exist so that this and this is adult learning we're talking about in a PLC, which is different from the pedagogy that we use within the classroom. So there are a lot of different elements that have to be absolutely nurtured within a school through leadership. And by leadership, I'm using that in the broadest terms. Teacher leaders, curriculum leaders, administrators. There are a lot of different leaders within a school. And the structure of this community can be varied. What it is not is we are required to go to our grade level meeting on Tuesday at 3:00, and we'll stay there for 45 minutes. That's also not a learning community. People will say, but that's a grade level meeting, which is also necessary. The idea that if you are in a learning community, you're not supposed to be doing these other things. That's a fallacy in my view. And another example for a learning community is that it has to be data driven. So once a problem within the group has been identified, then we look at the data. Unfortunately, people will, especially principals, are very guilty of this. They'll go to a workshop, they'll see something, they'll come back and say, look, everybody needs to learn how to do this, now do it. And without looking at the data within the school and identifying a specific problem, that strategy may very well not be the right one to work towards the issue that's at hand. So by putting within the learning community the data and having that group of people determine what they want to look at and how they're going about to address that problem, it may be from that they will say, we need to go to this particular workshop to learn this particular skill, put that in practice, that strategy with our students, and then see how it does. We need to have an attitude of continuous improvement, plan, do, check, act, right? So that as the group gets together in a very structured environment, which it's hard for people sometimes to deal with the structure of the environment, so that issue can be addressed. Sometimes what happens when teachers get together is it turns into a gripe session. And, this is bad and this is bad and I can't do this and I don't have time. And all of those feelings are very important, because if you look at the stress that we are under at this particular time with the pandemic and the issues associated not only educationally with the pandemic, but with the individuals in a school individually. Who had COVID, who didn't have COVID, how did you deal with COVID? And then to take on all of the issues with our kids, there is a real imperative that we have to look at how we are doing things with our kids in our school to promote student learning. So we already have this impetus. So what are we going to do about it? And how do you eat an elephant? This is a giant issue. So you eat an elephant one bite at a time. And the people involved in the process, in my view, are best able to look at who are the students that they face every day. How can we look at what their issues are? Where do we want to be? And then figure out a roadmap to get there by planning backwards. So this requires an immense amount of trust, vulnerability, for someone to say, I am really having trouble with what's going on right now. My kids aren't learning. If we base on where teachers' motives for 99.9% of the teachers involved, their motives are virtuous, they are clear, they want to care for their kids, they want their kids to learn, and the frustration comes when they see that what they're doing isn't happening. And a lot of times you look outside, it takes a vulnerability to be able to look inside and to have a very strong commitment to that critical element. So a PLC that is facilitated well using specific protocols that lessen some of that war story griping element that can sometimes happen within meetings. And the structure of those meetings shows people who are involved that their time is valued, their input is valued, their feelings are valued, and it can be very systematic and very focused. The worst thing you can do is to call someone to a meeting and waste their time. So I don't want to, it is an issue sometimes that in the immediacy of a problem, something has to be done right now. And I totally understand that. We've got to do something today. Let's change our behavior. Let's look at the results, and then we can change attitudes. So I understand that. And a PLC is a long-term process. So you're looking at a tension between two dynamics. So the requirement to go, I hate. It's, in my view, it's better to work with the people who volunteer, who want to be there. I don't believe it needs to be limited to a particular grade level, subject area. One of the most successful PLCs I was ever involved with was a vertical PLC. So you had people, it was within an elementary school, but everybody wasn't in kindergarten or fifth grade. There were teachers from across those groups. And to see a fifth grade teacher be vulnerable to present an issue that with a project, this is the project, this is what I expected, and then this is what I got, and what I got and what I wanted are like this far apart. And to have a kindergarten teacher ask a question, just a question, to that teacher who was presenting her work, and the fifth grade teacher goes, oh, wow, I never thought of that. Because you get different eyes on on what the issue might be. So a variety of perspectives can be very enlightening.
That being said, let me ask you this. Does a
Sure.
PLC have to be localized within a school, or can it be expanded, I mean, in a way that it sort of covers a district, even like internationally, thanks to the internet, right? A Facebook group, Zoom, what have you.
I totally think that the technology can be used in that way. For me, there is an ideal number, 5 or 6. I don't care where they're from. I don't care what their math, ESL, elementary, chemistry, people together. The point is to practice the protocols so that the focus is on the presenter. So here is this person who's coming to a group that has built up a trust where they can be vulnerable. So within this protocol, they can say, here is my work. Here is the work that I presented. This is my plan for this project. This is what I implemented it. And here is the work that my students brought to it. It's not what I wanted. Help me look at this to improve my practice so that I can bring it back.
And so it could be cross-curricular.
Absolutely. Because you're looking, you may or may not be looking at you're looking more at the implementation of the teaching process. And a lot of that is cross-curricular. And you want things to be inquiry-based as far as the PLC is going. Okay, I hear what you're saying to me. I can ask you questions about things I don't understand, perhaps. And then I can offer through questioning, have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? Have you thought of this? And then that teacher can bring it back. Say, okay. So you're looking at a continuously improvement model.
So it doesn't have to be localized. It could be district, even international. It doesn't have to be by subject or by topic. It could be cross-curricular. How about education systems like American system, Canadian system, IB system, etc.?
So the biggest test for me was exactly the group that you participated in when I was fortunate enough to go to Cairo. One of the questions that is always important to me is, what if I'm wrong? So that as you're looking at, I'm going to try this, what if I'm wrong? Is it going to damage? Is it going to work? And if there's not an element that this is going to sink a project, okay, let's try this and see what happens. I frankly did not know if we would be successful within the structure of a country that's very different, in my view, from what we dealt with in the United States. And what was one of the things we found, Ramez, that when we did the sections on data analysis, the way we disaggregated the data in the test set, it was totally, pardon the pun, it was foreign, right? Because we were using disaggregated data based on things like we called free and reduced lunch, ESOL, all these different topics, and it made no sense to you.
Yes, I remember there was a couple of things. That was the hardest one, I think.
It was the hardest part.
And now I know why, because there was a lot of elements there. It's like, we don't have this, we don't have that.
Right. Okay. So what did we have to do as facilitators? We had to change the data set, right? So if you are facilitating one of these groups, a skilled facilitator will look around and go, uh-oh, we need to be agile and we need to change. Remember, we changed after lunch because the lunch was so delicious and wonderful. We all ate too much, right? So we had to change that. We had to change the focus of the day on how we approach things. And we really had to build trust, because when we first walked in, here are all these Americans. What do we know about what you know? And there was some overlap, but we had to learn. And I believe that the group there learned. And by the end of the session, there was a real bonding, a real trust, a real respect, and a showing of a strong commitment to serving the students that were there and the students that were to come. So if you make a mistake, if you miss, fix it, change it, work it up. differently. One of the most important parts about beginning to do this is to have facilitators who have some background in understanding how to facilitate these learning communities. There's an element of data analysis. However, a lot of schools will say, oh, we have data teams. Well, that is a part, but a data team may say, okay, if we've looked at our standardized test data and here are the elements within your reading scores that your students are not succeeding in, and then they go, here. So the teacher now says, okay, what am I supposed to do now? And through the learning community, by working through that test data, then identifying if there's somebody within the group, somebody within the school who is being more successful, perhaps you can look at that, have that person bring something to the table, you work on that, and then you implement and come back again with another data assessment. One caution I have is that only looking at standardized test data is a tremendous mistake. And it is confining, and it also doesn't serve our students.
And so how else can you measure? I agree with you, absolutely, of course. But
I said standardized test data. So let's say that you're working on, you've gone through a data analysis and you have identified an element for, if we're looking at mathematics, so within 5 strands, let's say you've identified my always favorite, time and money in an elementary school, because it's really a hoot. Trying to teach time and money. I know these high school people, well, anybody can teach time. You try to tell a second grader what a nickel is, it's not as easy as it seems. So, but once you've identified that, then if you have developed some strategies that you work through with the students, what sort of an assessment do you want to give? For younger age children, you might want to have a school store. And the teacher said, okay, here are some coins that you can use, whatever the money in your country might be. Have the student buy some things and have them pay you with those coins. That is a performance assessment.
Right.
And you can actually get real-time data from that. And it might be a better assessment than going from the real coins in the little kids' hands to looking at a nickel on a printout. So there are different ways to measure. So if the kids are getting good this way, and you know that down the line on the standardized test, they're going to have to look at pictures, move from the concrete to the visual, give that bridge instead of jumping over it, you will see progress as you go along. In the high schools, perhaps it's more of a performance project that you have certain benchmarks to meet. So a presentation, a book, a podcast, a role playing, as long as you are measuring the specific goals of what you have identified that you want the students to learn, there are other ways to do it. Even though in the end, they're probably going to have to do this standardized test. Almost every country I know has some sort of a standardized test. The way to move towards that has intermediate steps. You don't wait to the end and say, here's your test, let's see how we did.
Yes.
Measure as you go along and measure things in different ways so that kids can show what they know and the teachers can see, what did my instruction do? One of the pieces that is also extremely important in this work, and this trust piece, is that because there was not the learning that a teacher expected, does not necessarily mean that this is a bad person. In looking at how to coach a teacher, the onus is off this person. It is not a personal. We're looking at the data. Let's try this. You did this well. Let's build on that. Let's look at this. I mean, it's human nature. if I build on what I'm good at, that's one thing. If I take what I'm not so good at and get better, that's also a good thing. So the benefits of doing this are long-term, and the commitment it's significant. Teachers can't do this without support from their school building, from their administrator. You need time, which is a premium. A lot of people look at resources as money. For schools, the resource is time. And perhaps some professional development for the facilitators within this. And it is school teacher leaders to work with, to go into smaller groups and to practice their craft. In the scaffolding of building a school that has different professional learning communities, it may start small. You start with this group, and then each one of those groups starts a group.
Yes,
and
right.
This group gets back together so that they can share what they're doing well, and they have continuous learning as facilitators.
And the groups meet up with each other, things like that, right?
Right. The beehive.
Yes, exactly. Okay. We are actually running out of time. I do want to ask you very quickly a couple of things. A facilitator of a PLC, do they have to have any specific training or traits or education, or just a leader?
They do need, in my view, some specific development using protocols that look at student work. And protocols and structures to keep the focus on the student work and the instruction, so that people don't get off track. So, and that it takes a certain type of person. An authoritarian person may or may not work well in this particular circumstance. So, but yes, I believe that there need to be strong facilitators, and they need development.
Okay, last question. What is your biggest frustration as an educator?
One of my, I hope this doesn't get too long for you, but one of my role models is Diane Ravitch. And early in the standardized testing movement, she was really gung-ho and worked with this. And when she realized she was wrong, she publicly retracted what she'd said before and wrote some books and developed, and I saw that as a real strength. What I find most frustrating is that people will make pronouncements who don't know what they're talking about, try to authoritatively put something in place, and then when it doesn't work, they won't get off the horse. When the horse is dead, get off the horse. And look to continuous improvement. That's what bothers me most.
And so that's what bothers you most as a professor of education, as a teacher, as an educator? Like, who would do this that would frustrate you?
Mostly people outside of education.
Okay.
Some of in the U.S., it's politicians, and some of those people frustrate me a great deal.
I get you.
Within a building, a principal and an administrator can be somewhat subversive and do things under the radar, which I find admirable.
I appreciate your time so much. This means a lot to me.
Ramez, I cannot tell you how much respect I have for you, where you came from, and where you are now.
I appreciate that.
Hug your twins for me.
I will. Thank you. If you don't mind, can I have you back on?
Anytime.
I love it. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Ramez.
That's our show for today. Share this episode with your teacher friends who might benefit from listening to it, and comment and let me know your own experiences being part of a PLC. Don't forget to rate this episode and subscribe. I'm Ramez Takawi, and this is Legendary Educator. Thanks for tuning in. I'll talk to you next time.